you have to constantly take risks at legal aid. We used to consult in the cells. So I would say that one of the scariest experiences was I was consulting in the cells, and there is an inmate or an accused person, sorry, because they're still awaiting trial at that point. They made a gesture, a sexual gesture, whilst I'm consulting. But to my surprise, the other accused persons came to my defense.
Okay. Welcome to another episode of Sisters in Conversation. I'm your host, Debelo Motwane. I'm an attorney by profession and the founder of a platform called Sister in Law, which is a platform dedicated to empowering women through legal education. On today's episode, I'm joined by Nothemba Sonjica, who is a legal officer at the Commission for Gender Equality. Nothemba, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tibolo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you that we finally made this day happen.
Finally, on Women's Month.
During Women's Month.
Yes.
That's exciting. And actually being, I don't want to give it away, but it is the second last episode for the season.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
It always starts in March during International Women's Month, and then it ends in August during our National Women's Month. So yeah, this is the second
Well
last.
done, congrats.
Sorry guys. The last guest. I won't tell you guys. But it's not the Chief Justice yet, but soon.
We'll definitely tune in.
Oh, Nothemba, how are you? Thank you so much for honoring the invite today. I am excited to hear from you.
Thank you
and
for
learn
having
from
me.
you. So, like I always do with my guests, can we take it to the beginning? Who is Nothemba? Where were you born and raised? Any highlights from primary school that you want to share with us? Holiday seasons with uncles, aunts, grandparents, so forth, and any highlights from high school?
All right. I was born in a small town in the Eastern Cape called Butterworth. Studied at Msobomvu High School, my high school. Then afterwards, I went to the University of Fort Hare, East London campus. I basically grew up in a female-headed household.
Love it.
Basically, my grandmother, my mother, and then my sisters. It's only now that we have boys around, my nephews. Otherwise, it was just females. I like to say I grew up around women who knew their worth.
I love it.
My grandmother always tells me the story of how she was lobolad with 5 cows, and she said, no way.
Okay.
I am worth more. So
Yeah.
she came back because of that. So I grew up around women who knew their worth. I was raised by a single mom, but I met my dad later on, who happened to be in the journalism field. He was a news producer at SABC.
Okay.
My highlights in high school, I was actually just an introvert. I was in the debate team though.
Okay.
However, in varsity, that's where I was more active. I was part of an organization called the Students for Law and Social Justice. That's where my passion for socio-economic rights and human rights began. I was also involved with a lot of community outreach programs, like the Nelson Mandela Institute for Rural Education and Development and the Sinompumelelo Reading Club. That's where I learned to work with vulnerable groups. Thereafter, I went to law school, PLT, and then I was recruited to work for the FACE Ombud, the Ombud for Financial Services Providers, as a graduate trainee. But because it didn't count towards articles, I had to look for articles. And you know how you're in varsity, you're like, I want to work for a big corporate firm.
Yeah.
You have this vision because of Suits, obviously,
Yes,
the series.
yeah.
So you imagine yourself as Jessica.
Yeah.
But the opportunity never came. You applied to these big law firms, they didn't take you. However, I am grateful. I was eventually employed by Legal Aid.
Okay. All right.
That's where my work ethic was really developed. At Legal Aid.
I like the direction that this is taking already. Purely because I always push the narrative that we're not all going to go to Big Five, right?
Exactly.
And there's also just more and more, there's a little bit of classism that exists in our profession. Like, oh, okay, are you at Big Five? Oh, okay, are you at a one man, run show? And then just classism that exists with we know the universities. So Stellenbosch, UCT, and then the rest come after, UP, UJ, then, the rest come after. So it's always important to push the narrative that we're not all going to get jobs at the top 5 law firms. And specifically when it comes to legal aid, I can tell you now that so many students or young professionals who are listening don't even know that there's an option of applying for articles at legal aid. So if you can take us back to how you came to learn about the fact that you can do your articles at legal aid and what the application process was like, maybe you can please just take us through that journey.
I actually did a legal internship, a vocational job at Legal Aid Butterworth, where I'm from. So I was studying in East London, but I'm from Butterworth. So I volunteered there during the holidays just to shadow one of the attorneys. So that's how the journey started. Thereafter, I was like, all right, I still want to go to the big 5 law firms. But I ended up applying because they advertise on their website. They have a candidate attorney recruitment program. They have an email and a database where you just apply. And then eventually when they have vacancies, they then call you for an assessment, then eventually an interview. So it's open throughout the whole year. So they don't have like a deadline. You just apply so you can be on the pool. So that when they're recruiting, they just take from the pool. And then they call you for an assessment or an interview.
I love that,
I applied, I put my CV in the database, I was called for an assessment, and then eventually an interview. And then I was employed at Legal Aid Mthatha Justice Center.
And you did your full 2 years of articles there?
Yes, I did my full 2 years.
Okay, and what was the experience like? I know at the beginning you said that's Legal Aid is the platform that really shaped the attorney or the legal practitioner that you are today. So what was your experience like there?
It really developed my work ethic. I know people have this misconception about legal aid attorneys, but from my experience, legal aid attorneys are the most dedicated I've met.
Absolutely.
They're in court from 9 to 4 sometimes. They have lots of files. So I learned how to work under pressure. I learned to provide quality legal services even to the vulnerable people, to the less educated people. So a certain standard is required. Even though you are serving vulnerable people or people from rural areas, you must still maintain that standard. And with this misconception that legal aid attorneys are lazy, which is to the contrary. I think then the misconception is shaped around the fact that legal aid attorneys, they take instructions from their clients. So you have to work with that instruction, whatever the instruction is. And you have to work with whatever version you have and with whatever evidence you have. And you have to proceed on that. So that is really where my work ethic was developed. And in terms of the civil section as well, I learned to be in touch with the masses. Because I learned what the people in the rural areas, their problem, their legal issues as well.
Men on the ground.
Issues regarding land as well, issues regarding family disputes, domestic violence, people who don't have the necessary information to know where to go. Because we used to also have community outreach programs. So that is really where I learned to work with vulnerable groups and where my work ethic was developed.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And are you able to highlight 1 or 2 matters that stand out to you that, I hear you say the whole experience shaped you and whatever, but what are the 2, 1 or 2 cases that really stand out to you where either you were like, what on earth am I doing in this profession? Or where you were like, well done for this, Nothemba, you are in the right place.
There was an experience where, you have to constantly take risks at legal aid. We used to consult in the cells. I would say one of the scariest experiences was I was consulting in the cells, and there is an inmate or an accused person, because they're still awaiting trial at that point. They made a gesture, a sexual gesture, whilst I'm consulting. But to my surprise, the other accused persons came to my defense.
Okay.
And I was escorted by the court orderlies. and they had to move him from that cell because the accused persons, they were still calling him into order.
Yes.
And threatening him.
Oh, no.
So that was a scary experience, but constantly you have
And you
to
were
put
younger.
yourself there.
You were young.
Yes, I was younger. And they say you have to
intense.
dress a certain way, no short skirts. No.
But sometimes it's not even about that.
It's not even about that. 'Cause still, I was wearing pants that day.
Yeah.
So, but with regards to a positive story, on the other side about working at Legal Aid, I got to work with persons with disabilities as well. I had a matter where the accused person was accused of murder, but he was a non-verbal person, but he never got training to sign language.
Okay.
So even though he was non-verbal, he couldn't sign.
He couldn't communicate.
He couldn't communicate.
Sure.
The only person who could understand was his mother.
Sure.
And you can't exactly use his mother to be the interpreter. So we had a struggle to get an interpreter that would assist us. And it took forever. So we had to apply for bail on new facts so that he can be released in the meantime. Because the matter was taking too long to finalize, even though it was a Schedule 6 offense. We had to apply for bail on new facts because initially he was denied bail. We had to apply on bail on new facts on the fact that we're struggling to get an interpreter. So he was released eventually on bail on new facts. I left before it was finalized, but at least he was awaiting trial outside.
Yeah.
He was not in custody.
Sure.
I also got to work with students who were a part of a school for the disabled called IFATA. Even though they were also non-verbal, but at least they could sign.
Yeah.
So I got the experience to consult with persons with disabilities, also to understand the state they're in, and to understand that they're also entitled to the same rights.
So compassion, basically.
Yeah. Compassion is important.
I absolutely love that. And after serving your articles, where did your journey take you from that? And can you say that the role you're in today was also largely shaped by your experience at Legal Aid?
Yes, as mentioned, I always had a passion for human rights issues and socio-economic rights issues. It's just that, like I said, the opportunity never came because I applied to Legal Resources Center, the Section 27s, the whatnot. But after my journey at Legal Aid, I worked for LegalWise.
Okay.
Where it was more insurance-based and consultation-based and advice-based. So I'll just advise people on certain things and then take instructions if they need to be referred to an attorney. So I was just on the non-practicing role. After some time, I got re-employed by Legal Aid on a permanent basis.
Okay.
Then after that, I got employed by a private firm.
Okay.
Which was a completely different experience. But I
Good or bad?
It was a bit of both.
Okay.
Because they were doing 95% rough matters.
Okay. All
so
right,
it was, for me, it wasn't very fulfilling.
It wasn't challenging.
Yes, it wasn't fulfilling because, yes, you draft the correspondence, you go to court, you communicate with claim handlers, you assist clients get rough offers, they get their settlements, they spend their money, and they finish it within months.
I blew it.
Yeah, I blew it type of vibe. So it wasn't very fulfilling for me. And that is where I felt like I was at a career crossroads.
Yeah.
I decided to study. I did a short course in compliance, risk and governance with vets. And then I also wrote convincing because I was trying to find myself because, like I said, I didn't get the opportunity to work where I wanted to work. So I was trying to maximize on the opportunity I have to study so that I can find my foot and my purpose. During that period, I prayed a lot because I felt like I was at a career crossroads. What's next for me?
Yeah.
And what is my purpose? So I prayed and I prayed until a friend sent me this post from CGE. And then I applied. And then eventually I was employed there.
Okay. So
and since then...
What is CGE? Tell us about CGE.
All right. CGE is the Commission for Gender Equality. It's a Chapter 9 institution. They're basically the custodians of gender equality.
Okay.
They ensure the achievement of gender equality. Basically, it's a very broad mandate. They have different departments. They have the research department. They have the legal department. They have the Public Education and Information Unit. The legal department does submissions on proposed law and existing law and practices that may be harmful or hinder on gender equality. They also have hearings where they invite public or private entities to account on issues of gender transformation. They investigate any gender-related issues, and then they litigate where there is a reason to litigate on an issue maybe that violates gender equality. For example, we've had a number of impactful judgments. I don't know if people know, because sometimes due to lack of the distribution of information, people don't know that the CGE is involved in certain cases. We were involved in the Van Beek case that had to do with the different forms of parenting and how people feel that there's discrimination in that sector, in that different parents are not catered to in terms of the basic conditions of Employment Act.
What was it, the parental leave?
Yes, the parental leave issue. So we were involved in that case and we got a favorable judgment. So we're awaiting confirmation from the Constitutional Court. We're also involved in the KG matter. KG matter is the matter concerning Section 7, subsection 8 of the Divorce Act. Which basically applied to marriages before 1978, which were out of community without accrual. And the basis there was that certain marriages before 1978 could enter into a redistribution agreement, even though they were out of community of property. So we've been involved in a number of impactful judgments.
That's very interesting. I was very invested in that case, but I did not know CGE was behind that. That's interesting.
We were involved. So we're involved in a number of cases.
I love that. So, at the beginning, I mentioned that a lot of people who listen to this podcast is like students, young professionals, and women in, the legal profession as a whole. But also, I can't invalidate the fact that there are, women or the man on the street out there that's listening to this episode, and the question they're probably asking is, okay, what does the CGE mean to me as a lay person? How can I relate to this commission or this institution, and how will they help me when I need assistance with a gender-related investigation or query, whatever?
All right. As mentioned, our mandate is very broad. We basically deal with complaints that have to do with the restriction, the exclusion, and the discrimination on the basis of gender or sexual orientation, which is very broad. So we even get to the individual complaints, no matter how people feel they are minor. So any complaint of gender-based violence, we investigate. Any complaint of sexual harassment, we investigate. Any complaint of discrimination on the grounds of pregnancy, we investigate. Where a person has been discriminated against because of their sexual orientation, we investigate. So our mandate is quite broad. Any gender-related issue, basically, the CGE can investigate.
So an example that probably most can relate to is if I go to the police station and I report an incident and I'm not being taken seriously, or maybe at the stage of approaching litigation, my file goes missing at court, and now that file went missing with all the evidence that I had gotten, and it had taken me too long to get DNA or whatever the case is. Can I then approach the commission to intervene into matters like that? Yes,
we do intervene in such cases. We have cases that we're currently monitoring because of that. People will allege that the SAPS is reluctant to investigate or finalize investigations, that they've been awaiting DNA, or that the person they laid a charge against has not been arrested, or the matter is delaying, or the NPA declined to prosecute, or that the matter has not been enrolled. So we do intervene in such cases, and we communicate with the NPA and the SAPS. We have a number of cases where the NPA has declined to prosecute for whatever reason, and upon our intervention, the matter was enrolled because they hadn't properly analyze the docket. So we have intervened in such cases and brought it to the attention of the NPA so they can reconsider. We also communicate with the complaints department of the SAPS, where we forward SAPS service delivery related complaints. So we do intervene in such cases, and we do encourage that people who have such problems, where they're not being taken seriously or the matter is not being investigated or where it's delaying, they can contact the commission. We have an email address, gender-inquiries@cge.org.za. So they can submit a complaint there. Or we also alternatively take walk-in complaints. We currently
that
have
was
issues.
my next question.
Yes, we currently have issues with our website. So at the moment, I would not say people can submit a complaint through our website. Alternatively, just contact the gender-inquiries email address or walk in at the CGU office. We will consult and then analyze and assess the complaint.
Okay, thank you. No, I'll share those details on my social media platforms. But most importantly, I think you've answered the question of, walk in and how you can be contacted. So I'll definitely share those details. And also, I'm really happy that we've answered the question of how the commission serves the layperson. I think that was the most important thing that I wanted to understand. So what does a typical day at the commission look like for you, Nothemba? And what would it typically look like for, maybe a student or a graduate out there that's contemplating applying for a job at the commission? What does a typical day just look like?
With the commission, like I said, I like to do the groundwork.
Yeah.
A lot of the groundwork involves having to investigate the individual complaints, except for the systemic issues. Because we do have the systemic issues, like I said, with the Van Wyk issue, it was a systemic issue. So we do have systemic issues in which we litigate on, but we do have individual complaints that require intervention from a grassroots level. So on a daily basis, I'll be either calling the NPA, the SAPS, trying to get responses, attending to court monitoring. If I pick up issues in court, I email the necessary people. So it would be doing the groundwork because I feel like the groundwork is important in achieving our mandate as the CGE. And giving attention to the individual complaints is also important. So I'll either be on the phone, emailing, or be in court, attending court, observing. And with regards to the systemic issues, I'll either be perusing pleadings, instructing attorneys, and making memos for the systemic issues.
Okay.
But on a daily basis, I will be doing the groundwork.
And when you say systemic issues, what are the 2 or 3 examples of systemic issues?
All right. I've already made it the example of the Van Wyk matter.
Yes.
Where with systemic issues, it's not an issue that affects only an individual.
Okay.
It's a class action matter, basically, if I can put it that way. It will basically be an issue that affects maybe a group of women or a group of men, for instance. If I can make a few examples, I'm not allowed to disclose what we're working on currently.
Please don't.
So I'm trying to look back on the work we've previously done.
I think that was a good example to
Yes.
just highlight that it also just really has the effect of changing legislation as well. Yeah.
Yes.
No.
So
please don't give away what you're busy with. We don't want to get into trouble.
yes, basically we do have a few pending matters on systemic issues that we're working on right now, but basically systemic issues are matters that affect not an individual but a group of people. Irrespective of their gender. They could be female, they could be male, they could be the LGBTQIA community. So we have a number of those that are currently pending. Yes.
Sure. And what kind of education have you been doing as the commission when it comes to issues of gender? Because a lot of the time when we speak issues of gender, the first thing that comes to our minds is women, right? But we do understand that gender is gender. It's not just specific on women. And I can understand that a lot of the time the focus would be on women empowerment or whatever. But are there any initiatives that are aimed at educating the public on, for example, maybe a man will go to the police station and report that he's been abused or hit by his wife at home or girlfriend or whatever. And when he gets to the police station, it's one big joke, like the law enforcement officials are not taking it seriously. What kind of education is the commission doing around those kind of dynamics that exist with, men in our society?
Right. We do have a public education and information unit and also our communications department. They normally send out text messages to either dispel certain myths or to drive awareness on certain issues. Our PEI unit, they have awareness programs on a lot of issues that affect both men and women. They will have outreach programs on consent. they will have outreach programs on. We have a program called Boys. Is it Boys to Men? Boys to Men. And then we have programs for both genders, basically, and we have outreach programs to educate people on gender-based violence, and that is where we state or educate certain communities that gender-based violence does not only affect women.
Yeah.
Our reach is quite wide because we have provinces all over the country, and then in those provinces we always focus on the areas that are hard to reach, meaning the rural areas, and then we'll move to other areas as well. So we try to maximize our reach and maximize our messaging as well.
Sure. All right. Thank you for that. And I think another question I want to ask is, sometimes in your line of work, especially when it comes to really trying to help vulnerable members of society, I can imagine that there would be horror stories, and how do you just separate your emotions and separate taking that work home with you and letting it keep you up at night, where you're like, get up in the middle of the night and I wonder if the Bello's okay, and if her boyfriend ended up, kicking her out of the house in the middle of the night. Like, how do you separate your emotions from the kind of work that you do, especially when it comes to people who are really in distress?
That's a challenge I experienced early on in my career. When I started working for legal aid. And that is where I started working on my emotional intelligence as well. So joining the commission, I came with that mentality as well, that I needed to separate my work from my job. Even though sometimes we have to have debriefing sessions, we have a mental awareness unit with HR. So sometimes you have to debrief because it gets too much. Even though you assume you're the strongest person, but you're also a woman at the end of the day. So you imagine yourself in the same shoes. You imagine yourself in the same circumstances. So it gets very difficult. But in order for us to deliver our mandate the best we can, we have to maintain a high standard of emotional intelligence to make sure that we assist the person with the issue and you don't make it about yourself. So in as much as it affects me sometimes, I have to remain strong to make sure that I assist the complainant.
And, just as you touched on, mental health and prioritizing that, what do you as Nothemba do when you're feeling really just stressed and on the verge of breakout? What are some of your favorite hobbies to do, or your downtime? Like, what do you enjoy doing?
I normally go hiking.
Okay.
I normally go hiking. It helps me a lot with my mental health. I get to think, when you think about certain things and you get to answer yourself as well. So it gives me that time to think and also to respond to myself and to give myself solutions, because what I've discovered, Jay, about life in general is that running away from your problems is not the solution. So face whatever you're facing, whatever challenge you're facing head on, come up with solutions, and then you'll be able to move from it. So I find that hiking helps me in that I face my problems head on. I come up with solutions, and it helps me a lot with debriefing myself. So I debrief myself with hiking.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. I think it's become so much easier speaking about, mental health and prioritizing our mental health from when I started in practice. I remember there was a time when I was feeling really overwhelmed, and at that time there was probably also microaggressions at play, which were just contributing to my overall slump and just feeling like this profession isn't for me at all. And it was very difficult to find a community in which you could discuss these things with. But most importantly, I didn't know that there was a term for it, that it falls under the, umbrella of depression or mental health, check-ins and all of that. There were no conversations, going on about that at the workplace. So it was very, very lonely, and you felt isolated. So I'm really happy that we've come to a point where in our environments at work, we're able to at least now be vulnerable about our mental state and our mental health at any given moment.
No, I understand what you mean. It's very difficult, like I said, as a woman, to remove yourself from certain situations. I'll make an example of a complaint I was handling with the CGE that we had to close, not because we wanted to close it, but because the SAPS said there were no leads.
Sure.
And at that point, you can't really take the job of the
Yeah,
SAPS
yeah.
and proceed with the investigation. But it means that the complainant is not going to get justice because there's no leads. So such cases, they affect you, especially considering the nature of the cases and the nature of the violations that the complainant
Yeah.
experienced. So you put yourself in the same shoes, and you would think there's no justice served to the complainant, and then it starts affecting you, like, what is really your job as a legal officer? What are you meant to do if you can't assist complainants in such situations, but it's beyond your control? So in such situations, I'm glad that our office has a mental awareness office with HR. So in such situations, we use such services. And it's important because you will not be able to move on from that situation. From that situation, you'll start thinking that you failed the complainant, and hence you won't be able to assist the next complainant. So it's important to get out of that funk, basically.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true. Yo, I can imagine, with just trying to personalize it, that does become a little bit of an issue. And I mean, in the spirit of Women's Month, what do you think that we as women in the legal profession can do to just play our part in either minimizing or spreading awareness when it comes to issues of domestic violence against especially women? Even if it comes from a legislative perspective, what can we do really to just fight this pandemic that is gender-based violence?
I think we need to be united in approach in terms of identifying the systemic issues. We've identified a number of systemic issues. I'll make an example with rape and consent. A lot of people were making comments behind doors regarding the Tsoko judgment, but no one was coming forth as from the legal profession to say, let us join maybe as friends of the court. Let us do this, let us do this.
Okay, yeah.
So we, in practice, every day you identify systemic issues. Either in court, you identify that widows are being abused at the master of the High Court. I'm making an example.
Yeah.
You identify certain issues in court that have to do with gender. You basically we need the courage to bring these issues forth, because they they might not necessarily affect us, but they affect people who need the protection the most. So we need to have that courage to bring those matters forth.
Sure, thank you for that. I really like that. And, I never even thought of that. So I love that you're calling us as women in the profession to, stand together as friends of the court. That's very important. A lot of the conversations that I've been a part of this month alone are really centered around the fact that it's all good and well that we're having these women empowerment, seminars and sessions where we invite each other as women, and there's 50, 100, 200 of us in a room, and we're discussing all these issues that affect us, but we're not inviting men into the conversation. And a lot of times, some of these issues are, like you said, systemic, and we need the intervention of men, and they need to be hearing our cries. But I think to personalize it to you specifically, have men played a significant role in empowering you as a female legal practitioner? Is there, any comment you can make on that? And if not, what do you think could be the issue for men not being intentional about wanting to mentor, especially Black women in the legal profession?
With regards to my journey, I've always felt like I needed to change the narrative, because I wouldn't say men have been a part of my journey in the legal profession. Zozibini once said we need to take up space.
Correct.
And you find that when you do take up that space in a room full of men, they take away your power.
Yeah.
Some way they find ways to support each other and exclude you.
Yeah.
So if you're in a room full of men, you basically feel the testosterone flowing.
And you feel small.
Yes, you feel small. They will find ways to indulge you, but not really take your points into consideration. Which is why it's important, even when we are in leadership positions, to make a meaningful impact.
Yeah.
Because the men that are normally there don't normally take us seriously.
Yeah.
So you need to drive your own messaging. You need to drive your own narrative. You need to take up space by making sure that if you are in a position of power, you make an impactful change. So my journey, I wouldn't say they have assisted me much. Yes.
Sure. I like what you said there in just taking up space and be in charge of your own narrative. One of the phrases that I live by is that the most courageous thing that you can do is use your voice even when it's shaking. Like, you are in a space, a room full of men, and now you need to make a comment, and now you are trying to second guess yourself because you're like, yo, I know every time I try to say something, John is going to intercept me
exactly.
and try to explain it better than I have explained it. Or he'll be like, oh, anyway, I wanted to say, as Nothemba was saying, this is what, you know how men are. But the most courageous thing you can do really is just use your voice. And that's part of you driving driving your own messaging. So thank you so much. That's so important. Sure. Yeah, this has been a very colorful conversation. I feel like I've asked you a little bit of everything that I wanted to ask. But as we come to the end of our conversation, is there something that I haven't asked you that you'd like to use this platform to share with us? Whether it's words of encouragement to students and young professionals, whether it's something significant that the commission is doing at the moment, any awareness campaigns that the commission will be partaking in this year for the balance of this year, really anything at all that you'd like to use this very thriving platform of Sustain Law to drive your message.
All right. Words of encouragement to the young professionals and LLB graduates. I'd say be open to exploring your journey.
Yeah.
Do not limit yourself. There are plenty of opportunities. It might not be what you want, but it will be a learning curve.
Yeah.
Or a learning experience. So be open-minded. Be prepared to learn as well. I never thought I'd end up with the commission.
Yeah.
But it's been a fulfilling journey because we do a very impactful work. So they must just be open to exploring the journey. They must not limit themselves. They must also not listen to the little comments that you have to work for the big five.
Yeah.
Just be open to experiencing things because there's a high rate of unemployment. You also don't want to sit at home waiting for an opportunity. You need to explore everything that you can.
Yeah.
And on the side of the commission, we have a conference on the 11th and 12th to explore 30 years of democracy and what it has meant to
September,
gender.
October?
September,
okay.
Yes, 11 and 12 September, where we'll be basically just looking back on the 30 years of democracy and what it has meant for gender equality and whether we are far or near achieving our mandate and what are the issues that are currently affecting gender equality. So it will basically be a reflection conference. So we'll be having such a conference on the 11th of 12th of September.
I can just already see myself there.
Don't worry, an invite will come.
Thank you so much, Nothemba. It's been incredibly beautiful having you grace this season with your presence. It wouldn't have been complete without you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey so colorfully with us. I am so happy and impressed at the narrative you've given, especially Legal Aid and Legal Wise, as career growth or career planting opportunities. And thank you for the work that you do at the Commission. What an invaluable contribution you've made to the legal profession as a whole. So thank you for the work that you do. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am glad that I got this invite, sister-in-law. It's in line with what we do, so we hopefully we'll still continue to work together.
Yeah, it does not end
Thank you for the invite.
Definitely. All right, you at home, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you're listening on, podcast as you go, don't forget to rate and review this episode. It's a small act that goes a long way in creating awareness of this show. So please don't forget to subscribe, follow the show, share with your loved ones, and most importantly, be back for the next episode. Until next time, bye.